What did you talk about in your video about the Unabomber?
So in that video, I cover the Unabomber's life and I cover his ideas. And the Unabomber's got a weird trajectory in that when I was growing up and when I was a child, he was seen as like a Marvel villain.
Yes.
He was this evil genius who created this plan to destroy modern civilization, who killed people. And now in the circles I hang in among disaffected young men, he's called Uncle Ted. And his ideas are championed as brilliant.
Wasn't he part of some sort of a Harvard CIA experiment?
Yes, MK Ultra. And this is something for people who don't know. The CIA has admitted to it themselves.
Right.
So this is something that's not a conspiracy theory.
Right.
Where MK Ultra was an experiment. The CIA it was an illegal testing on Americans.
Yes, I had Tom O'Neill on here.
Great.
You've heard of him.
Amazing.
You read his book, right?
No, I haven't.
Oh, really? Oh my God, it's one of the best fucking books ever.
Huh.
Have you heard of Tom?
No, I haven't. I'll read it.
He wrote, it's that red book behind you. It's called CIA, Charles Manson, Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. He was a reporter for a LA news magazine, and he got assigned to do a story on like the 20th anniversary of the Charles Manson murders.
Yeah.
And he like fell into a rabbit hole, kept finding shit.
Yeah.
And he kept extending his deadline. He extended his deadline so far out that the fucking newspaper went out of business. They got into a lawsuit because they kept paying him. He never finished it. He eventually had to like hire these lawyers and figured out how to like, win the lawsuit to buy back the fucking story from them.
Yes.
Spent 20 years chasing everybody involved in the whole story. Met fucking Manson's probation officer.
Shit.
Met everyone involved from Jolly West, the people that were working in the free clinic, and discovered all the fucking LSD and amphetamine experiments they were doing on people back then. It is a wild book. The deepest, most thorough book on that story, on MK Ultra.
I'll check it out. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So your audience is already familiar with MK Ultra, and the thing with Kaczynski, and so we don't know how bad it was, because when the perpetrator of your trauma is a superbly powerful government agency, you're not going to open up to people about it. And one of the weird things at Kaczynski's life is, this is one of the things that got edited out of the video by my editor that I'm really annoyed listening over to. I left it out. Is that Kaczynski had a period where he had sexual fantasy about being transgender. And he had incredible guilt about this. He went to a therapist. He refused to talk to a therapist about it. And so MK Ultra did have sexual molestation. It wouldn't surprise me if he got those fantasies from that. And so we know at least, and again, I'm just throwing out theories, but we know at least that Kaczynski went into because he went to Harvard. He had an IQ of 167th, which is like in the millionth percentile. 167 is absurd IQ levels. That's close to what we think Isaac Newton's IQ level was. So we know that they had all of his respected professors come in, and then they had him insult his worldview and rip it apart and say why it's bad as a test in how much you can control someone's mind. And so he had, I say in the video, I think the government said he had schizophrenia. I think he had PTSD. And so that informs a lot of his worldview. And when all is said and done, I think Kaczynski is one of the best critics of modernity. I think he's a singular thinker in ways that I rarely find. And his criticism of modernity is called over-socialization, which is that modernity is a giant industrial machine that has to operate out of its own logic. And you are rewarded in industrial societies with how much you can cooperate with the machine. So what happened there is that we select for standardization and we select for, and we scale. And so America 200 years ago was this super diverse local society. A Pennsylvanian might as well be a different country than a Floridian 200 years ago. Now we've standardized all Americans to this new globo homo, which is a word I love with triple meaning. We've made everyone globo homo so that we've removed what people's individuality are. And so there was no school system before the Industrial Revolution. And the school system makes you wake up at a uniform time, work for someone else. it makes you work inside the machine. There was basically no employment in the pre-industrial world. Everyone was a self-employed ranching farmer. The only people who'd be equivalent to the employed today would be servants or slaves. So industrialization forces us to control our own behaviors where, for example, the left, which is peak over socialization, the left wants to remove people's traditional ethnic, family, sexual, national, religious ties. The left wants to destroy every single sort of meaning or social connection people have independent from the left, from the state, from the bureaucracy. And so that's the attempt to destroy human nature, to make us programmed so that we can be easily controlled by the machine. And so I agree with Kaczynski there. I don't agree with his terrorism. I think killing 3 people and blowing up constant things is objectively bad.
Yeah. Definitely. And the MK Ultra, the idea behind MK Ultra was that they would basically break down people's mind and basically turn them into a blank slate.
Yes.
And be able to like inject any kind of crazy shit they wanted. There was a lot of weird shit going on in that period of time. That was like a lot of paperclip scientists were involved in that stuff. And yeah. This is
a rabbit hole I've been meaning to do for years. I just don't know how to research it because I've been looking at this from the perspective of Edward Bernays, where
that was what's his name's like cousin, right?
Netflix and Sigmund Freud. So
Sigmund Freud,
So Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew, and then his nephew made Netflix.
Really?
Yeah, they must have good blood.
Bernays' nephew made Netflix.
Yeah.
Have you seen the documentary by
Adam Curtis? I think
yes.
Adam Curtis is the best documentary filmmaker today. That's one of the best documentaries I've seen.
I have to agree with you.
Yeah.
The craziest thing about his documentaries too is he doesn't film anything. He uses all source footage and does a voiceover, telling these incredible stories. So Bernays is responsible for basically creating like the advertising and consumerism in America.
Yes.
And one of the great examples in that documentary, I forget the exact, I think it was I forget the name of the documentary that he talks about Bernays in, but
Century of the Self.
Century of the Self, yeah. They talk about advertising when it relates to, I think it was like a Betty Crocker cake mix or something like that. And they were trying to figure out how to sell this cake mix. People weren't buying it. They were trying to market it to housewives. And the reason they did like a psychological group study where they brought in a bunch of housewives to try to figure out how we could better sell this.
Yes.
They figured out the housewives felt guilty because of how easy it was to bake this cake. So they just altered the instructions on it to say you have to add an egg. So now the housewives felt more productive and like they were contributing more to the household by they didn't need to add the egg. They just put that on there. So they psychologically felt more important, and they fucking flew off the shelves after that.
Yes. So I think I'm using Bernays because I think he's symbolic of several very important things in our society. I sometimes think calling World War I until the present the Bernays era, because that era of history and the elite, it's this globalist, bi-coastal, technocratic elite that uses psychological manipulation to control people. And this is a big thing in conservative philosophy where the leftist elite doesn't want to drive tanks over their enemies. They want to gradually mold their minds through a variety of methods, media, school, subconscious programming, etc., to agree with them. And the thing with Bernays is that he plays into the concept of human nature we have very well, where there was a thinker of the mid-20th century, and this feeds into the blue pill anthropology lies, called Skinner. In Skinner's behaviorism, it's like you give a rat a cookie, or whatever the rat cookie is, and then the rat does something for you. So they found they could program rat behaviors by incentive structures. Mm-hmm. So this was their idea of human nature. So you give humans dopamine boosts if they do things you like to gradually train their behavior. So that's how we've turned everyone into being NPCs, because we've literally created a science of using dopamine boosts to control people's behavior for the last century. And that's what Bernays' thing was. Bernays said, I will target people's subconscious drives to control them. And my friend Sam Obergia has said that people are rational in societies that train them to be rational. In that if you're in a tribal society where you worship the wood dick god.
Yeah.
You are trained to have that kind of psychological, you're trained to venerate the god. And in our society, you're trained to be hysterical and respond to NPC stimuli. So people are that way. If you were a society 300 years ago where you're expected to read all of these ancient Greek philosophers, you'll end up being rational. So I think implicit in Bernays is this very strong criticism of our entire era of history. And I also want to make another video based off the Adam Curtis concept of hypernormalization.